In this video, we're going to talk about hooks. Hooks are new to version 16.8. We're currently in alpha. Right now, they are highly recommending that we start switching to using hooks as soon as possible. If you go to the main documentation page, you can see here on the preview, there are several areas they want you to review. Introducing hooks, hooks at a glance, states, effects, and then how to build your own hooks. Here's a simple example of how to include hooks. Previously, we were discussing using classes as the main component, as the parent component. Well, now using hooks, we no longer need to use classes. We will go back to using functional components. I know that's completely different than what we've been talking about before. It's kind of going back in and thinking in functions versus classes. Here, we're going to use something called useState. It is a package that React included with this last update. Here is an example. You're going to use function, and then now instead of using state, you're going to use this. The constant, whatever your variable name is going to be, this, for example, they used count, that is going to declare the state. The set count is going to be what's now going to be used as the set state to update the state. Before we were using state and set state, now we're using the variable name and set whatever the variable name is. We have to say equals use state because we need to go ahead and use that component piece. If you scroll down, it'll give you an introduction and some of the breaking and updating changes. You are completely opting in. They want you to use these as soon as possible. It is 100% backwards compatibility, meaning they won't break any classes, but they do want you to start using useState instead of class methods. The hooks API reference would be here, and it shows you all of the hooks that are contained within this API add-on. The main two that you're going to use are the useState and the useEffect. The useState will be to update the state, and the useEffect will be whenever you have to use a component, such as component will mount and component did mount. Let's take a look at the code. If you've just downloaded the Create React app, hooks should already be installed into the library for you. However, if they're not, you can use an npm install to install the latest version of React hooks. What you will need to do to change from using classes to hooks is three simple things. It will contain information on the app, on the form, and on the list itself. I did take the code from the previous tutorial so that you could use it as reference. Here would be the old way that we wrote the component using a state. With the new React hook, we will have to go back to writing a functional component. Here you could see that I went ahead and created a variable. And with the variable, I'm going to use the new method called useState. This is what React created in order for us to now connect this command with the state. The first part of this would actually be the name of the state. The second part of this would be what we're going to use to set the state or update the state. Make sure that you have two variables in there, one for the state and one for the updated state. Here I named mine glist and then set glist. Then I created my array within the variable itself. Next, what we're going to do is take our add and remove that we had before and just change those into constant variables. You can see here it's the same exact code that we had before. However, we did make one or two slight changes. You can compare it from the old version up here where I had the state is equal to glist.push. Here what we're going to do is take the array itself, make a copy of it, and push the new item to the array. Once we've done that, we're going to set the state by using the name that we defined here in the variable. That is all we need to do to make the add state work just from updating our old code. The remove is going to be the same way. We have the remove, we have the index that we're removing the item from. Here we're setting up a new variable called new name. I'm going to set that equal to the glist array. We're going to make a copy of that and splice the correct item using the index. Then we're going to set the state to update that array or that state. Down below, it's going to be slightly different. We no longer have a render method. You will notice that we will have a return statement. In the return statement is where we're going to add our information. Here is the form component that we had from before, and then also the list. Before the list was in the actual render. Now that we're using a functional component, it will be below in the div. Before I go on and explain this a little further, let's take a look at the pieces. My form. The way that we had the form before was a constant called myForms. We passed through some props and then exported it as default. Now with the new way that we use useState, it's going to update it just slightly. We are now going to have a function called myForm. In the form, we're able to do some validation. But before we do the validation, we need to set the state. So here we're going to set the state using a variable of value to call the state and then set state to update the state. Here's a simple validation that I'll go over in just a second. On the form itself, we have the onSubmit, so when the user clicks the submit button, it will then pass through this variable function here. You'll next notice the input. It has a type of equal to text. I gave it a class, and then value is set to value. This will be used up here in this function. We also need to have an onChange that's going to get the value, so when the user types in the information, it will get that value and pass it to the parent component. Then we have the add button. When the user clicks the add button, it will check this validation. Here we're going to run a simple validation. If there is no value, we're going to go ahead and loop out of that. Otherwise, we're going to get the value and then update that state. That will be all that you have to do for the form. It's just like it was before with some slight updates. Take a look at the list. On the list, you'll remember we had one that looked like this. It was a constant called list. We passed through some props. In the props, we got a value of name and a value of summary. I believe in the other lectures it was something other than summary. I believe it was price. Here in this example, it's very similar to the one before, except this time we're going to add some parameters in the top. We have glist so that we can have the array, the index so we can remove the right item, and then the remove function so the delete will actually work. Here we're passing through glist. You'll see that we no longer have to use props as a keyword. Here we're just going to say glist for the ID, one for the name, and one for the price. Then we have the button to remove that item based off of the index. Back to the app, that will help me explain this part better. In the list, we're going to take the array of glist and loop through that using the index. We're going to take the list component that we created previously. We will link the key, index, glist, and remove name to this component. Once you have that, make sure that you also have in the add form, add name is equal to add name. That will help us push through the information from the form. If you've done everything correctly, you should be able to type in an item, have it add, and also remove. You can also use effect to update the local storage. You can try that on your own.